Thank y'all so much for being here today, whether you're from here in the Houston area or outside of Houston, which I love. All right, so real quick, our agenda for today, we are going to talk about updates. So updates for your church school partnership, your organization. How have y'all been doing in this crazy time of COVID? Second, we'll talk about some specific challenges. So what are some of the challenges that have been facing you, whether in your organization or your church school partnership? And during that time, we'll also have time to brainstorm solutions. I know that most of you all have been here to a Loving Houston event before, but there are a couple of new folks here. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction about Loving Houston. So we were started about 7 years ago with this idea that we wanted to help our churches to love Houston better. Because as Christians, we know that we are called to love our neighbors as ourselves, and we're called to love as Jesus first loved us. So we're called to love selflessly, we're called to love sacrificially and personally as Jesus did, and in a way that just really seeks the ultimate well-being of our neighbors. But what does this look like practically, right? Because there are more than 2 million people in the city of Houston and 7 million people in greater Houston. So what we realized with some input from Dr. Stephen Kleinberg from Rice University is that focusing on kids makes the most sense. If we're really looking to love our communities in Jesus' name, there's no better place to start than with our children. As it says in Proverbs, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And to reach our children, there's no better place to serve than in our schools, because that's where the children are. And also the school is the hub of every community. So our mission at Loving Houston is to advance community transformation by helping churches to serve local schools. And our vision is to see every single school. There's like 1,500 schools in Greater Houston. We want to see every school in Greater Houston with a committed, caring church partner. If you look at this map, this is a map of all of the schools in Greater Houston. So you can see that every neighborhood has at least one school that the children in the community attend. So if we're able to connect every single one of these schools with a church partner, that allows the love of Jesus to be shown in every single one of these schools, to every child, to every parent, and to every teacher in our communities. Before we get started, I just want to get us all on the same page. So this is our definition of what a church school partnership is. It's a committed relationship between a church and a school in which both parties work together for the well-being and academic success of the students. This is what we're talking about today. We're talking about a church and a school working together in a committed relationship for the students. And I'm just so grateful for how so many of y'all are leading your churches and schools and school districts to do exactly this. So thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all. And I'm so happy that you guys are here today. Before we go into our breakout rooms, because Marilyn Mann is here from Humble ISD and we're talking about church school partnerships, I've asked if she could just take a couple minutes to share from the school district perspective how things have been, how things are going, just to give all of us a perspective that we may not have as church people or nonprofit people. So Marilyn, would you take a couple minutes and share with us?
Yes, thank you, Marilyn. Well, we wanted to say thank you because Brittany is so awesome. She has formed several partnerships during the pandemic, giving our other schools out there, Humble Elementary, Ridge Creek Elementary, these are our Title I schools. And so we as a school district really appreciate what the churches are doing. I know Brittany and Higher Expectations, the church, they've done a food distribution, and Woodlands, the Tascasita Church, has done a weekly food distribution. The church community has really loved all of our families, all of our children, our teachers with the notes of encouragement, lots of chocolate, providing meals, which is, comfort food for them. All the church partners have been praying. Higher Expectations has given water bottles to all the kids. They can't drink out of the water fountain anymore. Churches have given to children's lunch accounts. just the kindness that the churches have shown is just, I'm gonna cry because it's just been great. Y'all have really taken care of our children. And Zeke, he's loved on K Park and really made a difference there. So even though it's a pandemic, you don't know it because of God's love. So thank y'all.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Marilyn. From your perspective, have there been additional challenges this year versus previous years because of COVID?
Well, yes, a lot of churches tutor and come to schools every week, and we can no longer do that. And mentors can no longer come to the campus either. We are having virtual trainings on how to train mentors on how to use Zoom when when we get and Brittany attended the Zoom training, so maybe she can comment on that. But we're looking forward to that day. The churches have been so creative in how they're reaching out and helping in different ways. So it's been nice. It's just we can't have that contact. Any other questions?
I would just ask, now that school is kind of settled in, are there any needs arising right now, or any opportunities for partnership that may be at the top of the list? I know before we were really focusing on getting our churches to support the teachers by doing back to school breakfast and letters and notes and all those sorts of things. But now that they're settled in, is there something that maybe is at the top of the list of ways churches can help out?
Well, the teachers still need lots of notes and encouragements. That's what we're getting from principals and administrators, that the teachers still need lots of support because, they have to teach online and then they have to teach in person. And then it takes so many hours to prep for both of them. Mm-hmm. So they just need lots of love still, lots of love.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. So now we'll go ahead and take some time to break out into our rooms. BJ, you want to start?
Seems like with our churches and our group, there is still a lot of striving towards making something happen this time and season, and the challenges that come with it, that there's a resolve though from our churches to say, we're going to find another way to continue to impact people. So for me personally, that's real encouraging to hear.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank y'all churches for that. Brittany, how about you?
I had Tiffany Terry from UBA join us, and she is new to the Houston area, did something similar in Richmond, Virginia, and so is here to learn. And also Ryan Mobley from Safe Families, doing something similar in Illinois, trying to get church school partnerships going there in the realm of being a middle ground to help families in crisis so that they don't end up in the foster care system. So I was thankful to see that we have other nonprofits that are joining in and teaming up with us, and we're all having our hands on these problems to try to solve them and bring glory to God in the meantime. And then Zeke just was kind of sharing where things are. The mentorship is kind of on pause, as Marilyn was talking about. In Humble, there are no visitors really allowed on campus right now. So that's kind of what we have to think through. How do we keep our partnerships engaged without being able to physically be there?
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. If you would, just talk about what has been challenging this year, specifically with your church school partnership, if you can, or with your nonprofit, because I know a lot of your nonprofits are also caring for kids. And so whatever challenges you guys have been facing, and then we'll talk about some ideas for solutions for those as well. Brittany, would you mind starting us off here?
Sure. So the challenges are like general COVID challenges. It's interesting because Marilyn talked about having a surplus of volunteers and not having a place for them to serve, which normally we'd be talking about an opposite problem with having opportunities, but not enough volunteers. And now volunteers are just like on standby, trying to figure out how they can help with all the COVID constraints. And with that being said, I know that we do a lot of virtual solutions to that. But Zeke mentioned that there is Zoom fatigue out now. And so we were trying to think of solutions for how to work around the Zoom fatigue and then also keep people engaged. And one of the things that Zeke was sharing that I loved is that they were utilizing local parks for their high school student groups so that they would be outside, they would be spaced and could be safe. And then also he does something he calls snack and chat, which is when he'll call the parents of his students that he has been working with at the high school, ask them for their favorite snack, set up a time where he can come by, and he comes by with a chair and they just hang out and talk. And so, I mean, that's just so awesome. And then Ryan kind of talked about with this organization how they can't avoid their problem of being socially isolated when their whole concept is families helping other families. And so we just kind of talked through some of the workarounds that they have, just people who don't feel comfortable taking in a child at this point, maybe serving in another capacity, like being a phone call to give some emotional support to that family.
Yeah, so that's interesting, the idea of a surplus of volunteers.
They can come to my church and serve because I need them.
Amen.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, Allie and Jeff, I want to hear what are some opportunities that you guys have at your churches that you guys are using volunteers for?
So we're doing our camp meals finally. We had to wait for the school to tell us what they needed, what they were ready for. So obviously we can't do mentoring and do that. So our camp meals are cooking, and we deliver those and the prizes and the gifts. We're doing our clothing drive that the schools asked us to do the first week in January, and trying to figure out how do we set up for that in the school gym, and then how do we man that when we're not supposed to man something. So they just now recently allowed us to do a whole bunch of things. So we're excited about that. But wow, our attendance is so low. And then our volunteer base is so low because of the people staying home. So we've got enough volunteers to do what we're doing. But that word surplus, I've been praying for that. So, and surplus funds and some other surplus. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, and thanks for all of those different things that y'all are doing too. That's great. And I love what you said at the beginning about waiting to hear what the school needs. I think that's really valuable, because as soon as you know what the school needs, then that's when you can jump in versus trying to do your own thing first. So yeah, thank you, Jeff. Allie, you mentioned you could use volunteers also. What are some things that y'all are doing that you could potentially use volunteers for?
Well, so I was half joking because, as you know, I'm the kids minister, and, we're back and we're by RSVP only, just to maintain certain numbers in each room and to keep the COVID policies as far as what the CDC says the regulations are for children. So in order to do that, we have to lower the number of kids we can have per class, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing ever to have a lower ratio. But it creates a need for more volunteers, because as more and more people start coming back, we just don't have enough people to serve. So that's that side of it, the church side of it. On the school side, we are about to partner with Klein because mentoring, just like Jeff was talking about, like we can't go in person, can't do things in person. So they are going to try mentoring via like a pen pal program. We are hoping to get just a ton of volunteers for that, including people who are still at home who maybe don't feel comfortable coming back yet. That's a way that they can still help a school and they can be involved and volunteer without sacrificing their safety or security. They write a letter or make a card for a child and it's taken to the school. Right now, we're hoping to partner with 3 different schools. And it'll be just the kids who are in person for now, just because trying to get something to a child who's at home would be really difficult. But to those kids who are back at school, who need a mentor, just for them to get a letter every week will really boost their spirit. And it also will be good for them reading and writing. So I think it's a win-win. We're just really praying for a lot of volunteers to sign up this weekend to get on board with that.
Awesome. Love that. I love that pen pal idea. One of my friends, her small group is partnered with a classroom, and each one of the families in their small group, they are pen pals with one kid. And so like the kids write, the parents write, like all of them write one letter. And so it's a neat way for the whole family to get involved in a safe, really personal way. So yeah, I love that idea. So Allie, do you want to go next? I know you and BJ were leading your group, right?
Yeah, overall, there's a desire for connectedness to be in person. And so it's hard mentally to kind of adapt to how do we do mentorship, if schools aren't allowing us to be in person, or how do we get in touch with the teachers and the staff? How do we be there? And because largely the expectation in connection with the schools is, in our call anyway, it was to drop off goods, not to come inside. But like Ali mentioned, that one of the things was about pen pals and Zoom and utilizing opportunities like that to continue to engage with people. And, there's just a lot of uncertainty too. We talked a little bit about fear being a driving thing for a lot of situations where maybe schools are experiencing less students coming back to in person. And how can we as the church demonstrate what it looks like to balance wisdom and living by faith? So that's a lot of our conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. That is a very interesting thing that you mentioned, BJ, about a lot of fear and uncertainty out there and how churches can kind of be a light amidst that fear and uncertainty. Do any of y'all, as y'all are caring, whether for your congregations or for your schools, how are y'all, or are you guys addressing that kind of fear and uncertainty somehow?
I mean, just to weigh in on that one, I mean, we're seeing it from the pulpit, right? Is that I think a lot of the pastors are realizing that just as community, not only the unbelievers, also the believers too, are needing some strengthening. So we're going through the Sermon on the Mount. I mean, that's great. I think we need to be strengthened as well. But again, I think the real need is gives us as believers an opportunity to reach those, because people are hurting. This pandemic's like a double punch. It's bringing in fear, doubt, and then it's also what you thought was going to be your normal year totally turned upside down. Why is that happening? So, and we understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andy. And Jeff, I saw you're unmuted. Were you wanting to jump in there as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say we're taking that on in the place of corporate prayer, praying. I believe that that's a really significant thing. And then our young people are pretty amazing. We've actually seen several young people come to Christ over the past several weeks. We have a small youth group and they're just being salt and light. But for the rest of us, we're really cut off from students, unless you have a child. We can't interact with them. We can't do things, or it's been our experience. So yeah, we've just taken that on in corporate prayer. Like I was saying this morning, we actually had a report from some teachers and the weariness that they're facing and the level that they're facing. So, we're trying to really undergird them with our prayers. And then any way that we can have those conversations and be the light that Andy was talking about, we're trying to encourage our people to be that. But there's still a lot of isolation, even in our neighborhoods, between families, and at least what we're experiencing. So we're not getting those one-on-one chances to really help, but our young people are, and our children are. And so we're hoping to send them back, with encouragement and faith and hope. But some of them are struggling. We've got some children in our church that are really, really scared, and we're trying to give them a place to talk, and it's in the church too, and how to deal with going back to school or not going back to school, as the case were.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And so as church leaders, both in our churches and in our church school partnerships, we have an opportunity to care for the people in our congregations, to love them, care for them, but also empower them, if possible, to be lights in their spheres of influence. So yeah, Jeff, what you were saying about empowering the kids, even though we can't necessarily be interacting with our kids right now, empowering the kids in our churches to then be lights to their classmates and friends and things like that. That's beautiful. And then kind of what Andy was talking about, being like speaking in our pulpits, addressing this fear and uncertainty, but then also going back to what Marilyn Mann was mentioning earlier, that the teachers really need support as well. So if there's a way that we can, write an encouraging note, it's not a sermon from the pulpit, but it's a little bit of encouragement or light to these teachers and administrators who are struggling right now. So yeah, thank you all so much for sharing that. Tawana.
Our group had similar challenges. The schools don't allow visitors. We can't meet the students because of COVID-19. They also indicated about they need more volunteers, but we also brought up the fact that now the volunteers have even more of an excuse. It's COVID-19. They're saying they're afraid. They don't want to do it now. Before COVID-19, it was something else. Nowadays, because of COVID-19, they got another excuse. I can't do it because I'm too afraid. These are just some of the challenges that we were talking about in our breakout room, but they were trying to pivot and, go around to try to see what they can actually do to meet with the students or to try to stay connected to the school.
It's so interesting. It seems like, Brittany, your group has a lot of volunteers. So somehow we need to spread the wealth to the ones that are having trouble getting volunteers. So real quick, you were mentioning not being able to connect with the students. So I really like Zeke's idea to be able to safely distance, but still be in communication. Snack and chats, thanks, Zeke. Still be in communication. And then the pen pals, I feel like that's another way. For me, I know I meet with my mentee via Zoom. That's down in Lamar Consolidated. So there are still opportunities, and I know school districts are working on getting opportunities up.
So I wanted to say that Zeke partners with Crew. That's how his church partners with Kingwood Park High School. What we were talking about was Crew partnering with different churches that are near the school that don't mind opening up their building for the high schoolers to come after school to still have their Crew meeting. And so just for the church that are on here, maybe that's a way that even if you don't have volunteers, just by opening up your building to these Bible study groups that are going on, then they have the people that are working them. They just need spaces to meet because the school district isn't allowing anyone on the campus. That's a great service to help, and the Crew has been looking for that. So
awesome. Anything else that wasn't shared just now that y'all are thinking about?
I just had a question. Some of you mentioned that you are doing individual mentoring via Zoom. How is the school setting that up? Because we would really like to do that, but are they having it like in a public place? Does the child come there? Does somebody from the school have to be there? What does the school's end of that look like?
What we're going to do is the child will come to the library, and then the counselor will be there while the Zoom mentoring is occurring. Okay. And then we have a permission slip.
That's perfect. Thank you.
My situation is similar. So my student goes to the counselor's office, and then she'll set him up on a tablet. And so then she stays in as a participant. We don't see her face or hear her or anything, but she stays there just to make sure that things are okay. And then my mentee and I talk, and then she'll come in at the end of our time and shut everything down.
And that makes sense to me, that it requires someone on the school end. The problem that I'm seeing is that some school districts do not have the personnel to do that. You know, everybody's so spread out that that's just not something they have. And we may be in that situation.
And Linda, that's exactly what happened with Klein. Is they requested to do Zoom, and they said, we just can't, because if the counselor has to be there, it would take up too much of their time to schedule that with each individual child and to be there. So that's why we're looking into the Pen Pal program, because, you know, we can deliver all the notes at once, like on a specific day, and then she can distribute them. So it makes it a little bit easier. And Marilyn, I wanted to mention one other thing we were talking about. So one thing that we did that we saw great success from was first day of school, we ordered one of those yard signs for our 3 schools, and it just said, CFBC loves Fox, or CFBC loves Zwink, or whatever the school name was. And it just kind of was a simple way to let them know, hey, we're here and we support you. And because of that, Fox Elementary, which is a brand new school, and so we hadn't reached out yet, they actually reached out to us when they had a family in need, because they saw that sign and they knew, oh, look, this church is right here. And so they reached out to us when they had a family in need, and now that opened the door to this mentoring thing. So, you know, I really recommend that. It doesn't have to be the first day of school. That can be any time. And it wasn't super expensive. And they came and set it up for us. Like, we literally did nothing except just pay. And it was money well spent. So I really recommend that. And the other thing I was going to say, when you're talking about children being a light, one thing that we challenged our kids at church, we're doing a pumpkin patch. And so we did the parable of the pumpkin in kids worship on Sunday, and I carved a cross into the pumpkin. And so we challenged the kids to go get a pumpkin and carve a cross in it and light that on their doorstep, to create conversations with their neighbors and with their friends. Like, hey, what's that? You know, why do you have a cross in your pumpkin? And we said, it's like this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And we challenged the kids to take a picture and post it on social media with "Let Your Light Shine." And so the more the kids do it, and the more traction that gets, it'll be out there. So that's just a fun thing that we challenged our kids to do, because the kids they go to school with are the kids in their neighborhood. So that way they'll see that.
Thank you so much, Allie. Thank you all so much for being here. Thanks so much for everything you're doing, all of your nonprofits, your churches, your schools, your school districts. Thank you so, so much for loving your congregations, your children, your communities in Jesus' name. So thank you all so much.